Well, Leif Johan, welcome to the World Energy Policy Summit in New Delhi. It was great to have you in our last edition in New Delhi, and we were hoping we'll be able to welcome you again here in Delhi, but unfortunately, Omicron or Omicron, I don't know what the correct pronunciation, has come in the way. This little invisible virus has come in the way. So, but unfortunately, we're not able to meet. But next time. But Leif Johan, as we discussed, as the topic of our conversation today for our World Energy Policy Summit, the ninth edition, by the way. This is would have been the 10th, but last year we couldn't go for one. And as you know, the trust is also the theme of ONS this year. And it's a very, very interesting theme, very philosophical, and at the same time, almost central to the energy as a whole, whether you look at energy, as a business, as an industry, or as an idea, or as a basically something you can't, go forward with in life. Um so later on, when I look at energy transition, which is happening the world over, whether we like it or not, and it's not the first time energy transition is happening. Energy transition has been going on now for 150 years, maybe even before. But even if you look at in the industrial sense, it has been going on for close to 160 years. From wood to coal to uh, oil to natural gas, and all kind of things. But still, when you look around the world today, the landscape, you talk of energy transition, you talk of zero emission, you talk of energy geopolitics, you look at transnational pipelines, you look at international business, whether in oil or solar and everything. You find that there are many fault lines. In some cases, there are many crises. For instance, look what's happening in your own neighborhood over Ukraine,
Mm.
and Russia is your neighbor. And or for that matter, look what's happening when the rich countries want zero emission tomorrow morning, and the developing countries, energy deficit countries, including India, they say, hey, come on, it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen tomorrow morning. It's probably going to take 30 years, 35 years, who knows? So we find in the energy sector, which is crucial for humanity, which is crucial for humanity growth, which is crucial for world peace, which is crucial for world prosperity, that level of trust is very, very low. You see between companies, you see between countries, you see between societies, and therefore some people call all kind of things, those who advocate green energy more than anything else, and so on and so forth. How do you look at it now that you are organizing this beautiful conference, which is one of the most important energy conferences on the planet, and trust you're chosen as your team? I'm sure you must have pondered over a trust, both in terms of business, but also philosophically. So where do you stand, and what has been your experience so far?
Thank you, Narendra, and sorry not being in Delhi today, but next year I'll be there for sure. And it was a great experience last time I visited the World Energy Policy Summit as well. And then about trust, which I think is the clue in the society. That's actually what brings us together, which keeps us together, being extremely important, as you are highlighting. And when we have been working together for many, many years, we have never needed to sign a paper because we have been trusting each other. We have the basis, the rock, actually. And I think the importance of trust, as you are already addressing, is more important than ever. It's more important than ever due to, and I agree with you, energy has been in transition since probably the early beginning. But the challenges we are facing for the time being are probably more extreme than we have seen for many, many years and decades. And if we are going to fulfill the energy transition, if you're going to do the changes being needed, and to do it in the speed which is also needed, we need to trust each other. Do President Putin and President Biden have that relation which is needed? For the time being, as you are mentioning about Ukraine, I'm quite uncertain actually. We're going to address and we're going to discuss which kinds of leadership should there be in the world? How should leaders work together? How should they be able to trust each other, which is so needed, both for the human beings in all kinds of aspects in the world, and for sure for the energy transition as well. And then, of course, when we are going to be through that energy transition, where we are going to do more solar, more wind, less coal, less oil, and for a period quite much gas, but hopefully we're able to clean that gas. We also need a leadership to go when we are having that transition, because it's not easy to do, and it's going to be a cost when we are doing it. People who have been working with some energy, just mentioning in the coal industry, for generations and generations, who not should do that anymore. How should that work? Where should they work? And how would they be able to get their daily income? Which kind of technology should we use? And how could we actually be able to share that technology? Countries being enemies don't share technology. So we need a global leadership where we trust each other. So we will at ONS 2022, we will of course address this global leadership, the need for it. We're going to see about how could we work together to build up technology, develop technology, to be sure that we have the technology being needed for the energy transition. And we also would like to see a just transition as a part of the program. How could we actually work together as equals? People in one country being very rich, people in another country not being as rich. How should we share actually the bill for the energy transition? And how should we also be sure that people who have to leave one kind of industry are invited to the next one for the future? This is issue which we are going to discuss and spend time on. And I'm a strong believer to bring people together and sit around the table and discuss and find solutions. And that's our aim, and that's what we're working for at ONS 2022.
Very good to hear this. I mean, many of your words are actually music to my ears, because that's what we want to. We want people in your part of the world to ponder over, to discuss, to think, and then hopefully walk the talk, because that's what is needed. I mean, energy today. When you look at the hotspots on the planet, where you have seen major crises, whether it's Ukraine or you see Iran or you see Venezuela, actually energy is at the core of all this. And many crises in the world. I mean, there's 3 billion energy poor on the planet. 3 billion, imagine, practically 50% of the world. And at the same time, you find that like big energy importers like India, we import big part of oil, natural gas, and other sources of energy, and also equipment for solar power and so on and so forth. And we find sometimes we are at loss to understand, just because some countries come together and they say, all right, tomorrow the oil prices are going to be that level, when we know the actual cost of production. And very poor people in a remote village in India, or Indonesia, or Bangladesh, or somewhere in Latin America or Africa end up paying for it. Is that kind of world order that we want? Is that kind of global governance that we want? And if that kind of disorder that you see, then the trust becomes the first casualty. Even if you have good intention, many of these people are going to say, oh, we don't trust you. You talk about it. And the same is actually when it comes to zero emission agenda or post-Glasgow, other things which have been said. There are many who question that. They say, oh, the rich countries, they build narratives, they build the roadmap, and they do it because it works for them now. So there is still a trust. Many countries have signed that post-Glasgow, but there is this trust deficit. So how should Leif Johan, you have been a politician before, you have worked with the people on the ground in your city and in Norway. What can, for instance, energy sector as a whole, as an industry, as a foundation like ONS Foundation, and we all as energy players in the energy sector, what can be done in order to bridge, so that we can't completely, get rid of this, but the point is that energy deficit, but do more, like you are trying to do at ONS. But there has evidently, when you look at the size of, trust deficit, a lot more need to be done. So what are your ideas? You have a great idea in terms of your own conference ONS later this year. But overall, what more can be done? How can energy communities come together and actually try to address this issue of energy trust deficit?
Yeah. And I think we're going to manage this if we actually believe in this one world, and we have one aim, and we need to trust each other, one and each of us. And you mentioned Glasgow. The next move will be in Egypt, in Cairo, for the next COP meeting. And I think it's extremely important that we are able actually to, and as you mentioned, a lot of countries signed an agreement. But we also know that when we are going to do the energy transition, there is going to be a bill to be paid. And we need to have systems how this should work. And it needs to be fair between all the countries in the world. And we know for sure that some countries need to pay more of that bill than others to be sure to manage this in a good way. And then I think actually, if I may say also, no, I think it's extremely important that we are able to have a vision, to know where to go. And what we are seeing today is that we are polluting the world in a really bad way, and the changes are happening very fast. On the other side, we also know that some countries have an economy to do the changes if needed. Other countries don't have that. And I think we need actually to trust each other that, as I said, it's one world, it's one globe. And it's not that part or this part. We need a common solution. And I'm a strong believer that what's unique with ONS as a meeting place, to your question, is that we are gathering both the leaders, political leaders, and the industry. I feel fair to say, I think that those individuals should be together. Not only politicians on one side or industry leaders on another side, but these people around the same table and finding the solutions, because this is a combination. It's not a political issue, it's not a technological issue, but it's a mixture of it. And I'm quite sure that a lot of the companies, as you see in your country, are able to use technology to find solutions. Last we met, you introduced me to new solutions in India with energy supply. How this works, I'm deeply impressed. So we actually need, and at the ONS, we are going to gather both political leaders and industry leaders on a global level to have them around the same table to find the solutions where we could work together. That's the uniqueness with ONS.
Well, I'm very glad you talked about, you indicated that, like, as you know, that you talked about Glasgow. And as you know, that earlier sessions had promised $100 billion per annum kind of support to developing countries in terms of technology, in terms of, going for energy transition. And then the rich countries, they promised, but then they didn't walk the talk. And that had created a huge trust deficit. And it's not only for politicians, but also for industry leaders and other community as a whole to make sure that actually they walk the talk so that, we can address this issue of trust deficit. But Leif Johan, but when you look at, for instance, Norway, Norway enjoys this very unique place in the world in the sense is, on the one hand is, energy rich country. At the same time, it's a country which takes leadership on many issues, including, peace, development, sustainable growth, and climate change, and so on and so forth, which is fascinating, of course. But what more you think, or, countries like Norway can do so that, transition from fossil fuels to renewables, can be fast-tracked? Because the fact is, the challenges that many countries in the developing world they face, including India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, or the whole of Africa practically, and many other countries in Latin America, is that they want to move as fast as possible, but then they don't have those kind of resources. They don't have that kind of, R&D at their disposal. They don't have those kind of other means. And unless you have all that somewhere on the horizon, not exactly on the table, but at least on the horizon, you can see them. Only then the political leadership come forward. You have been a politician yourself. I mean, politicians are not going to promise to their people something which they don't see on the horizon. Once things are on the horizon, they can go to the people and say, hey, look, these are the things available on the horizon. You support me, and I'm going to go for this fast track, this transition. Right now, the fact is the politicians promise, but they make promises in Glasgow for them, they may make in Cairo at tremendous political risk for their own careers. Because if there's not an horizon, if rich countries are not willing to walk the talk, I mean, they can ruin their careers and in the process, their own political parties if you're a democracy.
If I may say, energy transition is not free lunch. It's going to be a cost. It's going to be a huge cost for countries like Norway, and we need to be prepared to pay that bill. And I for sure hope that when we see each other in Cairo, that is not ending the last day of the meeting, where what you are addressing is going to be an issue. I for sure hope it's going to be from now until people are meeting in Cairo, and then being able to have a solution in advance. I also feel, and we need to get this up on the table. This is nothing which is. It should be discussed on a much higher level than it's been for the last years, and we should be able to also have an understanding how this should be solved. Because I totally agree with you, Narendra. Without a kind of common framework around this, it's going to be extremely difficult to find a good solution on the climate target. And then, if I may say, I'm quite convinced that Norway will play a role. But even in Norway, we are not prepared for the cost which this is gonna give us. And that's quite a lot of the countries in the world. We need brave politicians. We need politicians being able to raise up, tell the story, the truth, and stand by. And that's a kind of leadership. And that's also about trust for the future. And it's about not for myself, but it's for the upcoming generations, how they should actually be able to live on modern Earth. Then I also think, what can we do together? I think technology. You know, I'm as you're mentioning, I'm a former politician. Been a politician for most of my life, but I'm quite sure that there is more answers regarding technology in this issue than we find in politicians' meetings. So we need actually to stress the technology. We need to spend money on research, development, and we need actually also to have that kind of technology being able to share. To know that what's developed one place, if you like to clean the gas, if you like to have the carbon capture, if you like to have the floating solar equipment around the world, we need to do this in a way where it's sharing and caring, taking care of each other, and working together as good human beings, trusting each other. And it's a far way to go, I know for sure. It's not easy. It's going to be extremely difficult. And in the meantime, we have conflicts like you were mentioning a few minutes ago, like Ukraine, Russia, etc., also being a disruptor in this picture. Because if we should be able to solve this, we need actually to have Russia around the table. And then we can't have a disagreement between NATO and Russia in the way we do for the time being. So it's about leadership, and we need leaders, wise leaders, taking the responsibility. And as we all know, it's still a way to go before we are there.
Well, fascinating points, Leif Johan. Absolutely. Ultimately, it boils down to leadership, whether in politics or big business or the energy sector as a whole. And just my last kind of point that I would like to raise, many people say that, you know, Norway and people from Norway, leaders from Norway, they can talk about nice things because they can afford. They're a rich country. Most of their money still comes from fossil fuels, but at the same time, we know that they are doing a lot in terms of renewables and so on and so forth. How do you look at it, and how do you explain that you are able to talk the way you are talking, or the other leaders talk, or the leadership the Norway enjoy in terms of telling the world what more need to be done on renewables. All that because you made your money from oil and gas, from fossil fuels. And is how do you react when you face such questions? Is there any truth in it, or you think yes, there is a truth, but now this is the time to look forward and to move forward and find basically to build a world which is more sustainable.
It's a very good question, and it's a totally understandable question, Narendra. Norway is a very small country with a large part of our economy is oil and gas activity, and our fortune is made mainly of the oil and gas. I think it would have been easy for Norway to say, okay, let's quit with the oil and gas and just start with renewables. I have seen the way the Norwegian country has been, our fellowship, I have been working actually to be sure that we are producing oil and gas in a very clean way and our sophisticated technology, how this works. So that's the number one in the question. I think Norway should still be in the oil and gas business, more and more in the gas business, and have very clear aims that we would like to produce gas, oil, extremely clean in a global basis. And then it's, of course, we have earned a fortune with oil and gas. And this is also about trust, Narendra. If we should be able to just travel around the world as climate democracy and say that we would like that people should work together, then we need to pay our share, and maybe more of our share. I think most what we can do is actually to be sure that we are exporting the technology, we're exporting the ideas, the framework to other countries, and setting up the regulatories, setting up the business. It's actually being able that we are doing the energy transition in the future. And for sure, it's extremely important. Whatever you do, you should do it in an honest way. And I think the Norwegians should be the dilemma you're addressing. We should be open-minded, knowing that might be also something which people see as an easy fix for Norway to do. But on the other side, I think it's a country where we are oil and gas exporter. We are, as a small country, we have been around the world. We have been doing negotiations with conflicts many places. We are a peaceful country, and we should be able also to have a role in this important matter. But we need to be prepared to pay our price. I think Norway are.
Well, very interesting, Leif, very optimistic and very fair point. But just the last point I would like to raise with you, since countries like India, we are energy deficit, major importers, and very vulnerable in terms of what happens to oil price or gas price or tomorrow renewable equipment price and so on and so forth. I mean, when you look at energy exporting countries, Norway is one. Energy technology exporting country, Norway is one. And when you look at the big part of the world that includes India, energy importing countries. I mean, we have seen cartels like OPEC, for instance, monopolizing things and basically creating a kind of market which many in the world, especially energy deficit countries in like India and many countries in Africa and others, they are at the receiving end. Some countries grow filthy rich and some at the cost of very poor oil and gas consumers in some very poor pockets of the developing world. Is that fair?
Of course.
Can't rich countries like Norway and developing countries come together, create a kind of global energy governance which is more just, more fair? We don't say you don't make money on, let's say, per barrel, make money, but windfall, that's not fair. Or as long as you're making reasonable profit, that's understandable. And in this age, to have bodies like OPEC, cartels like OPEC, and so on and so forth. I mean, when you look around realistically, it's a hell of a lot of mess on the ground. We need to create a new world order for energy, which is fair and just for everyone, for exporters as well as importers. Do you think I'm daydreaming? Do you think is that possible at all? Or you think it's never going to happen?
I've learned you, Narendra, to know as a true optimist, but you're also a realist. And the way you are expressing it is the way it should be. We know for sure that it's still a very long way to go. But I think you should stay by your means. We should actually be responsible to also to follow your advice, how this should work and how we should share actually the common goods. I also think it's extremely important in the next wave, because inside the energy transition, if you see, you could say oil and gas, which is restricted to some countries, but also when we need, for the next wave, we see the minerals, how limited they are, and how few countries actually who is having those mineral resources. That will be the next one to come. So this is also a part of this, both the discussion and the solution. We need to find a way out of this. It can't be that one country around the world is having 80% of the natural resources in one issue. Either it's Norway or it's whatever it should be. So we need to, I think what we're gonna see, if we're not finding solutions around this, we're gonna find a world which is even more uncertain for the future. And it's more, which is not working together and not trusting each other. So we need actually to sit down and we need to find solutions. And that's all it's about. If we trust each other, that's possible. As I've mentioned to you, I think we have been working together now for quite a few years. We have never signed a paper together. We don't need it. We trust each other. And that's the way it should be for the future.
Well said, well said. And I think that's what we need. We need to create a kind of world order which is just for every single human being on the planet. At the same time, it's a very small world. It's a very small planet. We need to create an energy order which is fair, not only to humans, but also to nature, to animals, to birds, to every single creature. Only then we will be able to create a sustainable world order. If we create a sustainable order for human beings, it may not be very sustainable. Unless it's a sustainable order in terms of energy for all creatures on the planet, I think we should be, then we will not be able to achieve the kind of prosperity we want. So we have a long, long way to go. But your focus and on trust and your decision of ONS to actually go for trust as a theme of such a big conference, such a big gathering of industry leaders, political leaders, I think it's a very significant, tremendous contribution in this global debate on the need of trust in making our world, especially in the terms of energy, more sustainable, more prosperous, and more peaceful. Thank you very much, Leif. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I look forward to seeing you in New Delhi at World Energy Policy Summit next time.
I look forward to be there. In the meantime, all the best to you and Narendra. All the great success for the conference. And see you at ONS in Stavanger in August as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.